Welcome back, 7th grade historians, to today's Explainer. So we have finally made it to Unit 11. You've traveled literally all the way from the earliest days of American colonization, straight through revolutions, civil wars, and massive global conflicts. But today we're facing the final and honestly, probably the most critical challenge of your entire U.S. history course. We are judging the recent past. You're going to take all those incredible skills you've been building all year and use them to analyze the world that's sitting right in front of you.
Let's just dive right into our essential question for this unit. How should historians judge recent events and competing interpretations? I want you to think of yourselves today not just as middle school students, but as actual historical detectives. Think about it. When we look back at something like the American Revolution, the case is pretty much closed, right? The evidence has been sorted out for centuries. But when we look at the late 20th and early 21st centuries, you are investigating a totally unsolved case. The clues are quite literally still dropping. People are still arguing over what happened, and it is entirely up to you to sort the facts from the fiction.
So here is our game plan for today. 1. The challenge of recent history. 2. Spotting historical bias. 3. Competing interpretations. 4. The evidence data check. And 5. Judging historical significance. Let's get into it.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the challenge of recent history.
You know, studying what happened just a couple of decades ago requires a totally different approach than studying ancient history. In Unit 11, we cover some massive shifts that have completely defined our modern era. We're talking about the resurgence of conservatism, the unbelievable global and cultural changes brought on by globalization, and of course, the absolute explosion of rapid technological change. But here's the catch. Judging these events is uniquely challenging for one really big reason. The societal debates about them are still happening right now. We don't have the luxury of 100 years of distance to see how it all perfectly plays out. The history we're looking at is still hot. Moving right along to Section 2, Spotting Historical Bias.
Because this recent history is still so fresh and honestly so highly debated, you absolutely need to know how to interrogate a source. This is the very first tool in your historical detective's toolkit. So let's define it clearly. Historical bias is when an author's account leans toward a specific point of view or interpretation of events, and that leaning shapes the content and the style of the text. Now listen, bias isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a human thing. Everyone has a perspective. But as a historian, if you don't recognize that bias, you might accidentally mistake one person's specific viewpoint for the absolute unquestionable truth.
Our literacy standards for history actually require us to actively assess how a point of view shapes a text. So here is a really handy, actionable 3-step checklist you can use. Step 1. Identify the author's purpose. Are they trying to inform you, persuade you, or maybe they just want to entertain you? Step 2. Look for leaning language. Are they using highly emotional words or really extreme adjectives to describe what's otherwise just a standard political event? And Step 3. Assess the point of view. Who exactly is the author, what's their background, and how might that influence what they're choosing to highlight, or, just as importantly, what they're choosing to leave out? That brings us perfectly to Section 3, Competing Historical Interpretations. Once you start spotting bias, you're going to quickly realize something huge. History isn't just one single unified story. It's really not. Navigating multiple and sometimes totally conflicting accounts is exactly what professional historians do every single day. Let's look at a concrete example from our pacing guide about the late 20th century. In your research, you are going to encounter texts that lean left. These texts will highlight liberal shifts, putting an emphasis on expanding government social programs to try and solve societal issues. But on the flip side, you're also going to encounter texts that lean right. These texts highlight conservative shifts with an emphasis on free markets and limited government intervention. So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. As 7th grade historical detectives, your job is to analyze both of these phenomena totally neutrally. We aren't here to endorse one political viewpoint over the other. We're here to investigate the historical evolution of both sides and understand these competing interpretations impartially. And this brilliantly illustrates one of our most important academic standards. You need to be able to compare 2 or more texts on the exact same topic to analyze their structural differences. When you read a liberal account of the 1980s economy right next to a conservative account, well, finding those structural differences in how they present their arguments is exactly how you piece together the full, complex puzzle of recent history. All right, on to Section 4, the evidence data check.
But how do we actually go about testing those competing arguments? This is for sure the most rigorous, roll up your sleeves part of our whole investigation. Let's look at the official standard. It asks you to, and I quote, delineate and evaluate the argument and specific claims in a text, including the validity of the reasoning as well as the relevance and sufficiency of the evidence. Okay, I know that sounds like a whole lot of heavy, boring academic language, but it's basically just asking one really simple question. Does the author actually have the receipts to back up what they are saying? Let's translate that standard into a totally straightforward procedure you can apply to any text. We like to call it the evidence data check. Step 1. Identify the core claim. What exactly is the author trying to prove here? Step 2. Locate the supporting facts and data. Are there hard numbers, primary sources, or actual historical facts being used to back it up? Next up, Step 3. Check for relevance and sufficiency. Is this evidence actually related to the claim, and crucially, is there enough of it to prove the point? And finally, Step 4, scan for bias, using that awesome 3-step checklist we learned just a moment ago. Let's actually walk through a worked example together so you can see how this builds your critical thinking in real time. Here is a data check table analyzing two totally different claims about recent history. The first claim is that technology improved daily life. Okay, the author's supporting evidence is data showing 90% internet adoption and massively increased communication speeds. So what's our evaluation? Well, this evidence is definitely relevant to the claim, and it's sufficient in its scale. It works. Now look at the second claim. Globalization hurts workers. The author supports this with a highly emotional, super detailed story about a single factory closure in one town. What's our evaluation here? Well, the story is certainly relevant to the claim, but a single story is totally insufficient to prove a massive claim about the entire global economy. As a historian, you would need way more data across a bunch of different industries to actually validate that reasoning. Do you see how using this tool instantly makes you an objective, clear-eyed judge of information? It's a real game changer. Finally, Section 5. Judging historical significance. Okay, so we've learned how to spot bias, we can compare competing interpretations, and we know how to run a rigorous check on the evidence. Now we transfer all those amazing detective skills to our ultimate goal, judging historical significance. This just means evaluating the absolute mountain of information in our modern world and determining which recent events, whether it's a huge new technological leap or a major shift in political power, will actually shape the long-term future. You get to be the active judges of what truly matters in our new century. So why does all this matter? Well, our educational framework presents a really powerful philosophy. It states that students should, quote, reflexively demonstrate the cogent reasoning and use of evidence that is essential to responsible citizenship. Mastering these tools isn't just about passing a 7th grade history test. I promise you it's not. It is vital for your life outside the classroom. You guys are the citizens who are going to vote, debate, and lead in this democracy, and you absolutely need to be able to navigate a world that is just full of conflicting information. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. You are now officially historians of the new century. Tomorrow morning, when you open up a news app, read an article, or hear people debating the latest events, how will you evaluate the evidence around you? Are you just going to blindly accept the very first claim you hear? Or are you going to step back and run an evidence data check? The tools are in your hands now. Keep asking those big questions, keep checking the evidence, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.